Hello, everybody, and thanks for being with me. Let me begin with some good news. Then I'm going to go to some bad news, and I'm going to end on, I hope, a good news note. The good news is it was just a poll that came out today. And the poll said that 55% of the American people, a very significant majority, are now supporting raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And I want you all to remember where we were like 3-4 years ago when very few people were talking about that. Same thing with Medicare for all. Poll after poll shows that overwhelming majority of the American people understand that health care must be a right and not a privilege. And if you want cost-effective universal health care, the way to go is through a Medicare for all single-payer program, making progress on that. We are making progress in the fight to redefine what public education in America means. And in my view, that means making public colleges and universities tuition-free. And all over the country, we're seeing progress in that area as well. We're seeing progress in criminal justice reform. So the good news is that in a number of areas where just a few years ago, there are only a small number of people standing up and fighting for real economic, social, environmental changes, racial changes in this country. What we're now seeing is majorities of people supporting the progressive agenda. And that tells me that when we stand together, when we don't allow the Donald Trumps of the world to divide us up by the color of our skin or our religion or the country we came from or our gender, or our sexual orientation, when we can stand together and fight for an economy and a government that works for all of us, not just the 1%, we can make real good progress. That's the good news. Now let me go to the bad news. And the bad news is that today we are on the 34th day of the shutdown precipitated by Donald Trump. You will all remember that Trump proudly stated on live TV that he would take responsibility for this shutdown. And that's, of course, where we are today. And what is going on right now is that hundreds of thousands of federal employees and their families and their kids are hurting really badly. These workers are now finding it hard to feed their families, and we are seeing many of them actually flocking to emergency food shelves. Now just think about that for a moment, how sad it is. Federal employees, people who have worked for the government in some cases for years and decades, now need to go to an emergency food shelf in order to feed their families. These are employees now worried about how they're going to pay their mortgages. Are they going to lose their homes? Is their credit rating going to be shot? They're worried about how they or their kids are going to be able to go to a doctor when they get sick because they may not have the money for the copayment or the deductible or the out-of-pocket expense. And by the way, what we should not forget is that this crisis, this government shutdown, is not just impacting federal employees. It is also impacting workers who are employed by companies who have contracts with the government. And sadly, many of these workers receive very, very low wages. They're getting $9, $10, $11 an hour. So for these workers, missing 1 week of pay is extremely problematic. And these workers, by the way, are not going to be made whole like the federal employees will when the government shutdown ends. And we're working on that. We're trying to solve that. But as of now, they're just simply missing their pay. So if you are a low-wage worker and you're not getting paid for 1 week or 2 weeks or longer, this is a financial disaster for your family. And this federal shutdown, as you all know, is not just about federal employees and the pain that they're experiencing. It is also about millions of Americans not being able to access the government services that they need. And that is, services at the Housing and Urban Development Department, services from the Department of Agriculture, the IRS, or many, many other government agencies. And the shutdown is also about national security. Many people in the airline industry are extremely worried about what happens when TSA employees are unable to come to work. Will our planes be as safe as they should be? And these folks are worried about air controllers. The guys that take us off and land us when we're in a plane are not being paid. And they're worried about morale at the FBI. If these agents, the FBI agents, are not getting paid. So this is a national security issue. Now that is the bad news. And in fact, it is very bad news. And it's very demoralizing news, all of which is caused by the gentleman in the White House. But let me conclude with some good news, I think. And that good news is that today, just a few hours ago, for the very first time, 6 Republicans in the Senate, Lamar Alexander, Susan Collins, Cory Gardner, Johnny Isakson, Lisa Murkowski, and Mitt Romney, 6 Republicans had the courage to stand up to Donald Trump, and they voted with Democrats to end the shutdown without spending billions for an unneeded wall. And in fact, they voted today for legislation that passed the House, legislation which is almost identical to what Republicans voted for last month before Trump changed his mind when he got intimidated by Fox News and other right-wing outlets, and then demanded that the then Republican House not pass the bill and allow the shutdown to take place. Now, what these 6 Republicans understand, and what most Americans understand, is that we cannot continue to hold federal employees hostage. They are being held hostage by Donald Trump, and that is unacceptable. And I think what these Republicans and all Democrats and the vast majority of the American people understand is that we need to reopen the government immediately. We need to pay our federal employees, and we then begin a serious discussion about issues surrounding border security and comprehensive immigration reform. Now, frankly, in my view, the ball is now in Mitch McConnell's court. McConnell is the Republican leader here in the Senate. And if we're going to end this terrible and dangerous shutdown, he has got to stand up to Trump, and he has got to bring forth the same legislation that he voted for over a month ago, legislation that was just passed by the new House of Representatives. And that legislation would end the government shutdown and put our federal employees back to work. So good news is 6 Republicans voted for us for the first time. We need 7 more. Let's keep up the pressure. Let's demand that the Senate do what the House has done, and in fact, what the American people want us to do. Thank you very much.